The scent of espresso and fresh basil hung thick in the air of Marcello's, mingling with the sharp tang of expensive cologne that seemed to seep from every corner of the restaurant. My fingers ached as I balanced another tray of dirty dishes, the porcelain clinking together in a rhythm I'd learned to perfect over 6 months of working here. The weight pressed into my palms, but I welcomed it. Anything to ground me, to remind me I was real, even if I felt invisible to everyone around me. I was a ghost in this place, a shadow that refilled water glasses and cleared plates while Manhattan's elite dined on $40 pasta and $70 steaks. My uniform, a simple black dress that had seen better days and an apron that never quite stayed tied, marked me as part of the backdrop, the scenery that made their luxury possible but wasn't worth noticing. My feet throbbed in shoes held together by determination and duct tape hidden beneath the insoles. The lunch rush had finally died down, leaving only a handful of tables occupied by men in suits that cost more than my rent. I moved between them like smoke, present but unacknowledged, my existence mattering only when they needed something. "Table 7 needs water," Marco, the head waiter, hissed as he passed me. His eyes barely registered my presence before he was gone, swept up in the choreographed dance of fine dining. I nodded to no one and made my way across the polished marble floor, my reflection warped and stretched in its glossy surface. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a building that probably housed millionaires in the apartments above. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white tablecloths, and soft Italian music played from speakers I couldn't see. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, beautiful and completely foreign, like I was visiting a country where I didn't speak the language. Table 7 sat near the back, partially hidden by a decorative screen. I could see the edge of a black suit jacket, the gleam of gold cufflinks catching the light. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the water pitcher. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from working double shifts and still barely making rent on my shoebox apartment in Queens. Last night I'd gotten 3 hours of sleep before my alarm screamed me awake at 5. As I rounded the screen, my shoe caught on something, a purse strap maybe, or the leg of a chair I hadn't seen. The world tilted, time stretched and contracted simultaneously as I felt myself falling forward, the water pitcher slipping from my grip. Cold water arced through the air in slow motion, catching the chandelier light like liquid diamonds. Then it hit him. The man at table 7 didn't flinch as ice water cascaded over his shoulder, soaking through what I immediately recognized as a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. The fabric darkened from charcoal to black, water dripping onto the pristine white tablecloth, pooling around his plate of untouched risotto. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I felt the absence of its beat, the terrible silence in my chest before it crashed back to life with painful force. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, the words tumbling out in a rush as I scrambled to set down the now empty pitcher. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see. I'll get towels, He still hadn't moved, hadn't even turned to look at me. He sat perfectly still, his hand frozen halfway to his wine glass. And something about that stillness made my skin prickle with a warning I didn't understand. The restaurant had gone quiet. I noticed it then. The absence of conversation, the way every server had stopped moving, how even the kitchen noise seemed to have died away. In my peripheral vision, I saw Marco's face drain of color. "Sir, please, I'll pay for the cleaning, My voice cracked. I couldn't afford to lose this job. I couldn't afford anything, really, but especially not this. Finally, he moved. Slowly, he set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. The crystal made no sound as it touched the table. Then he turned his head, and I saw his face for the first time. My breath caught in my throat for an entirely different reason. He was young, early 30s maybe, with sharp features that looked carved from marble and eyes so dark they appeared black in the restaurant's lighting. His hair was perfectly styled, pushed back from his forehead in a way that probably took either no effort or a great deal of money. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless face. His jaw was set in a hard line, and when those dark eyes locked onto mine, I felt pinned in place like a butterfly on a collector's board. "What's your name?" His voice was low, quiet, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, but smoothed out by years of American influence. Emma, I whispered, my throat dry, despite having just spilled an entire pitcher of water. Emma Torres. He studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I found I couldn't. His gaze traveled over my face, lingering on details I didn't understand. My eyes, my mouth, the nervous way I bit my lower lip. Something flickered in his expression. There and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Emma Torres, he repeated, as if testing how my name felt in his mouth. Then, without breaking eye contact, he said, "Leave us." I blinked, confused, until I realized he wasn't talking to me. Around us, the restaurant emptied. Servers disappeared into the kitchen. Diners suddenly remembered pressing appointments. Even Marco vanished through the front door with a speed that would have been comical under different circumstances. Within seconds, we were alone. Me standing there dripping with humiliation. Him sitting calmly in his soaked suit as if nothing unusual had happened. "I really am sorry," I tried again, my voice barely above a whisper. "It was an accident. I'll pay for—" "Sit." It wasn't a request. The single word carried weight, authority that made my knees want to buckle. But I remained standing, some stubborn part of me refusing to obey a command from a stranger, no matter how terrifying. His lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. "You have two choices, Emma Torres. You can sit, or you can keep standing while you explain to me why you're working yourself to exhaustion in a place like this. How did you—" "The shadows under your eyes," he said simply. "The way you moved before you fell. Automatic. Practiced, but slow. Your shoes." His gaze dropped briefly to my feet. "You've been here since the morning shift, haven't you? Probably before that." "When did you last sleep?" The observation was so accurate, so unexpectedly personal, that I found myself sinking into the chair across from him without consciously deciding to move. My legs trembled with relief at no longer having to hold me up. 3 hours, I admitted, then immediately wondered why I was telling this stranger anything. But that's not... lots of people work hard. That's just life. Not people who look like you. Heat flooded my cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He leaned back in his chair, seemingly unbothered by the water still dripping from his sleeve. "You're exhausted, underpaid, and invisible to everyone in this room. But you shouldn't be." His eyes held mine with unnerving focus. "Tell me, Emma, how much do they pay you to be treated like furniture?" "That's none of your—" "Answer the question." There was steel beneath the quiet tone, a edge that suggested arguing would be unwise. I swallowed hard. 15 an hour plus tips. "Tips you split with how many servers?" 5. He made a sound that might have been amusement or disgust. "And your rent? Why do you care?" The words escaped before I could stop them, sharp with defensive anger. "Look, I spilled water on you, and I'm sorry, but that doesn't give you the right to interrogate me about my life." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his jacket, the movement making me tense instinctively, and withdrew a wallet. From it, he pulled out a business card, black with silver lettering I couldn't read from my position. He set it on the table between us. "My name is Dante Salvatore," he said, "and you've just created a very interesting problem for me, Emma Torres." "A problem?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Because I spilled water on you? Because now I've seen you." His words were soft, but they landed with the weight of a threat or a promise. I couldn't tell which. "And I can't seem to stop looking." My heart hammered against my ribs. This felt dangerous, though I couldn't articulate why. He hadn't threatened me, hadn't even raised his voice, but every instinct I possessed was screaming at me to run. Instead, I sat frozen, caught in the gravity of his attention like a comet pulled toward the sun. "I should go," I managed. My shift isn't over, and your shift is over." He gestured vaguely toward the empty restaurant. "I've bought out the rest of the day." "You've what?" The owner was very accommodating. That not-quite smile returned. "Take the card, Emma. Think about whether you want to continue breaking yourself for scraps, or if you might be interested in a different arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Suspicion crept into my voice, along with something else. Curiosity I knew better than to indulge, the kind where you're no longer invisible. He stood, and I realized he was tall, well over 6 feet, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire room despite his lean build. Water still darkened his suit, but he wore it like armor. The kind where you're protected, provided for, and never have to wear shoes held together with tape again. My face burned. He'd noticed. Of course he'd noticed. This man who saw everything, who had somehow looked at me and seen past the carefully constructed facade of fine I presented to the world. I'm not... I stood as well, my chair scraping against the floor. I don't know what you think I am, but I'm not interested in being anyone's... Careful. The word cut through my protest like a blade. Finish that sentence and you'll insult us both. I'm not propositioning you, Emma. I'm offering you a choice. A choice to do what? To let me take care of you. He said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if men offered to take care of waitresses who spilled water on them every day. To accept that sometimes accidents happen for a reason, and perhaps you stumbling into my life wasn't as random as it appears. This was insane. He was insane, or I was, or maybe we both were. But beneath the fear and confusion, something else stirred. A desperate, dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, I could stop drowning in exhaustion and debt, and the grinding reality of survival. I don't even know you, I said weakly. You will. He picked up the business card and held it out to me. When I didn't take it, he stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne now, something dark and expensive that made my head spin. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Take it, Emma. Call the number tomorrow, or don't, and continue your life as it is, but know that I'll be waiting for your decision. My hand moved without permission, accepting the card. His fingers brushed mine as he released it, and the touch sent electricity racing up my arm. The card was heavy, premium quality, with embossed lettering that read Dante Salvatore followed by a phone number. No title, no company name, nothing to indicate who or what he was. Who are you? I whispered. Someone who takes what he wants, he replied, and I find myself wanting to ensure you're never cold, hungry, or invisible again. He stepped back, putting distance between us that felt both like relief and loss. The question is, will you let me? Before I could respond, the front door of the restaurant opened. 2 men entered, both wearing dark suits and the kind of alert, watchful expressions I associated with bodyguards or police. They didn't approach, but their presence changed the atmosphere immediately, adding a layer of danger I'd only half perceived before. Dante's attention never wavered from me. Think about it, he said. But don't think too long. I'm not a patient man, Emma Torres, and now that I've found you, I have no intention of letting you slip away. He walked past me then, his shoulder almost brushing mine, and I caught the scent of him again. Expensive cologne layered over something else, something that smelled like power and danger, and promises that could either save or destroy me. The 2 men fell into step behind him as he exited the restaurant, and through the window, I saw a black SUV with tinted windows pull up to the curb. Dante climbed into the back seat without looking back, and then they were gone, leaving me standing alone in an empty restaurant with a business card burning in my palm, and the terrible suspicion that my life had just irrevocably changed. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A text from Marco. Take the rest of the day. You're paid through close. Don't ask questions. I looked down at the card in my hand, at the elegant script of Dante Salvatore's name. My reflection stared back at me from the polished surface of table 7, where water still pooled on the white tablecloth. Evidence that this hadn't been a dream or hallucination brought on by exhaustion. This was real. He was real. And somehow, I knew with absolute certainty that calling that number would be either the best or worst decision I'd ever make. I didn't call the next day, or the day after that. The business card sat on my nightstand like a small black rectangle of temptation, catching the early morning light that filtered through my apartment's single window. Each time I woke up, which was always too early, always to the blaring alarm that dragged me from dreams I couldn't quite remember, I stared at it. Dante Salvatore's name seemed to pulse in the dim light, a promise or a threat I couldn't decode. Work continued as it always had. Marco never mentioned the incident, though I caught him watching me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read. The other servers whispered when they thought I wasn't listening, speculation swirling about the man who'd bought out the restaurant for an afternoon. I kept my head down, carried my trays, smiled at customers who looked through me like glass. But everything felt different now. The exhaustion still dragged at my bones. The money still disappeared as fast as I earned it. But now I was aware of it in a way I hadn't been before. Dante had held up a mirror, and I couldn't stop seeing what he'd shown me. How small my life had become, how invisible I'd made myself just to survive. On the third night, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. My hands shook as I picked it up, recognizing the heavy paper stock, the way my name was written across the front in elegant script. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address in Manhattan and a time, 7 p.m. tomorrow. No signature, no explanation. Just the expectation that I would come. I should have thrown it away. Should have called the police, maybe, or at least told someone that a strange man was sending me mysterious messages. Instead, I held that paper until my fingers cramped, reading and rereading the address until it was burned into my memory. The next evening found me standing outside a building in Tribeca that made Marcello's look shabby by comparison. Glass and steel reached toward the darkening sky, and through the lobby windows, I could see marble floors and modern art that probably cost more than my life was worth. A doorman stood at attention, his uniform pristine, his expression carefully neutral. I looked down at my outfit, the nicest dress I owned, which was a simple navy blue thing I'd bought at Target 2 years ago. My shoes were new, at least, purchased that afternoon with money I definitely shouldn't have spent. But I couldn't bring myself to meet Dante Salvatore in shoes held together with tape. "Miss Torres?" The doorman's voice made me jump. He was looking at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Mr. Salvatore is expecting you. Penthouse level." Of course he was expecting me. Of course he'd known I would come. Had probably known from the moment he'd held out that business card. The realization should have angered me. But instead, I felt a strange sense of inevitability, as if I'd been moving toward this moment since the second I'd spilled water on his expensive suit. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, forcing me to confront my reflection from every angle. I looked small, scared, completely out of my depth. My hair, which I'd actually spent time on, was already starting to fall from the clip I'd used. Dark circles still shadowed my eyes despite the concealer I'd applied. I was a girl playing dress-up, pretending to belong in a world of penthouses and doormen and men who could buy out restaurants on a whim. The elevator climbed, numbers ticking higher until they stopped at PH. The doors opened directly into an apartment that stole the breath from my lungs. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Manhattan's glittering skyline. The city spread out like a carpet of stars. The space was open, modern, with dark hardwood floors and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Art hung on the walls, real art, the kind I'd only ever seen in books. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly clean, and utterly intimidating. Dante stood by the windows, his back to me, hands in his pockets as he surveyed his kingdom. He wore black again, slacks and a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that were more muscular than I'd expected. Even in silhouette, he commanded attention, radiated the same dangerous authority I'd felt in the restaurant. "You came." He didn't turn around. "I wasn't certain you would. The envelope under my door was pretty persuasive," I said, pleased when my voice didn't shake. "How did you know where I live? I know everything about you, Emma." Now he turned, and the intensity of his gaze hit me like a physical force. "Your address, your rent, the fact that you send money to your mother in Arizona every month, even though you can barely feed yourself. The student loans you're drowning in from a degree you never finished. Should I continue?" Ice flooded my veins, chased by heat that might have been anger or fear or both. "You investigated me? I protect my interests." He moved toward me with predatory grace, each step measured and deliberate, and you became my interest the moment you looked at me with those exhausted eyes and apologized for existing in my space. I apologized for spilling water on you. No. He stopped close enough that I could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell that expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "You apologized for being visible, for daring to disrupt my world with your presence. You've been apologizing for existing your entire life, haven't you, Emma?" The observation cut too close to truths I didn't want to examine. "Why am I here, Mr. Salvatore?" "Dante," he corrected. "And you're here because I'm going to make you an offer. One I suggest you accept. And if I don't?" His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Then you go back to your life, the 16-hour shifts, the shoes held together with hope, the slow drowning in debt and exhaustion. Is that what you want? I want to know what you want from me." I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not show how his proximity was affecting me, the way my pulse raced, how my skin felt too tight, the dangerous pull I felt toward this man who was clearly accustomed to getting whatever he desired. "Dinner," he said simply. "Tonight, tomorrow, every night if I choose. Your time, your attention, your presence when I require it." That sounds like, "I told you before not to finish that sentence." His voice dropped to something darker, a warning wrapped in silk. "What I'm offering is protection, Emma. Security. An end to the struggle that's killing you by degrees. In exchange for what? Being your—" I couldn't even say the word, whatever it was. "In exchange for letting me take care of you." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed his thumb across my cheek. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and completely at odds with the danger that emanated from him. "For allowing me to ensure you never go hungry, never work yourself to exhaustion, never have to be invisible again." "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why me? You could have anyone." Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or memory. "Because when you fell into my life, you reminded me of someone I lost. Because your eyes hold a light I thought was extinct in this world. Because I looked at you and felt something I haven't felt in years." His hand moved to cup my jaw, tilting my face up to his. "And because what Dante Salvatore wants, he keeps. You don't even know me. I'll learn." It was a promise and a threat. "Say yes, Emma. Let me give you everything you need." I should have run. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to thank him politely and leave, to go back to my small, safe, exhausting life. But standing there in his penthouse with the city glittering behind him and his hand warm against my skin, I felt something inside me crack open. A desperate, reckless hunger for more than survival. "What happens if I say yes?" My voice was barely audible. "Then you become mine to protect." His thumb traced my lower lip, and I felt the touch everywhere. Mine to provide for, mine to keep safe from a world that's tried to break you. "And if I want to leave, you won't." Absolute certainty colored his words. "But if you do, you'll find it's not as simple as walking away. I don't give up what's mine easily, Emma." Red flags were waving frantically in my mind, warning sirens blaring. This was possessive, controlling, dangerous. This was a man who saw me as a belonging, not a person. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. A dark thrill at being wanted so completely, at being seen when I'd spent so long invisible. "I need time to think," I managed. "No." He released me, stepping back, and I felt the loss of his touch like cold water. "You decide now, or the offer disappears. I'm not a patient man, and I won't beg. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Emma. You know that better than most." He moved to a side table, poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. "But I can make it easier. I can give you comfort, security, protection. All you have to do is say yes." He held out one of the glasses. I stared at it, at the expensive crystal catching the light, at the casual wealth represented in something as simple as a drink. My entire existence had been a series of compromises, of bending until I nearly broke just to survive another day. What was one more compromise if it meant not drowning anymore? I took the glass. Our fingers brushed, and electricity arced between us again, that dangerous pull intensifying. "Yes," I whispered, then stronger. "Yes." Satisfaction transformed his features, making him somehow more beautiful and more terrifying. "Good girl." He raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings." I drank, the liquor burning down my throat, and wondered what I'd just agreed to. What kind of man investigated women who spilled water on him? What kind of man demanded total devotion in exchange for security? And why did some twisted part of me want to surrender to exactly that? "There are rules," Dante said. setting down his glass. You'll move into the guest suite here tomorrow. You'll quit your job at Marcello's. I've already arranged your final paycheck and severance. You'll answer when I call, come when I summon you, and be available when I need your presence. That sounds like I own you? He smiled, and it was a predator's expression. I do, in every way that matters. But in return, you'll want for nothing. Clothes, food, comfort, anything you need is yours. You'll be protected, cherished, kept safe from anything that might harm you, and if someone asks what I am to you, you're mine. That's all anyone needs to know. He moved closer again, invading my space with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. But understand this, Emma. What I give, I can take away. Betray my trust, lie to me. Try to leave without permission, and you'll discover I can be very unforgiving. You're threatening me. I'm setting expectations. His hand came up to wrap around my throat. Not squeezing, just resting there. A promise of control. I told you I protect my interests aggressively. You're my interest now, which means you're also my responsibility. I take both very seriously. I should have been terrified, should have pulled away, thrown my drink in his face, run for the elevator, and never looked back. Instead, I stood frozen, feeling his pulse beat against my skin, watching something dark and possessive burn in his eyes. What if I meet someone else? I asked recklessly. What if I fall in love with someone who isn't you? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. His hand tightened fractionally on my throat, and his expression turned to carved stone. Then that person will disappear, and you'll learn why people fear the name Salvatore. I don't share, Emma. Not ever, not even the possibility of your attention. That's insane. That's honesty. He released me but didn't step back. I warned you. I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you a gilded cage with a very possessive keeper. If you can't accept that, leave now. But I didn't leave. Couldn't, maybe, or wouldn't. The distinction felt meaningless. Instead, I drained the rest of my drink and met his eyes with something that felt like surrender, or defiance, or both. When do I move in? I asked. His smile could have lit the city. Tomorrow. I'll send a car for your things. Then he pulled me close, one hand tangling in my hair, the other spanning my waist. But tonight, you'll stay. I find I don't want to let you out of my sight just yet. Dante. Shh. His mouth hovered above mine, close enough that I could feel his breath. You're mine now, Emma Torres. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he released me and moved toward the kitchen, leaving me standing alone with my heart racing and the terrible knowledge that I'd just made a deal with a devil who wore expensive suits and saw me as a possession to be kept. And the most terrifying part, some dark corner of my soul welcomed exactly that. The guest suite was larger than my entire apartment had been. I stood in the doorway the next morning, watching as two men in dark suits carried in the pathetic collection of boxes that contained my entire life. It had taken less than an hour to pack everything I owned, clothes that were more worn than worn in, a few books I'd kept from college, some photographs of my mother. The men didn't speak to me, didn't even make eye contact as they worked with efficient precision, and I recognized them as the same two who'd escorted Dante from the restaurant. Miss Torres. One of them nodded curtly before they left, pulling the door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a lock engaging. The room was beautiful in an impersonal way. Cream walls, plush carpeting, a bed that could sleep 4 people comfortably. Windows overlooked the city, though not with the panoramic view Dante's master suite undoubtedly possessed. A bathroom connected to the bedroom, all marble and chrome, with towels so thick and soft I'd almost cried when I touched them that morning. But it wasn't mine. None of this was mine. I was a guest, a kept thing. A pretty problem Dante Salvatore had decided to solve by locking me away in luxury. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Lunch at 1. Wear the blue dress in the closet. I hadn't noticed the closet. Opening it revealed an array of clothing I definitely hadn't owned yesterday. Dresses in rich fabrics, shoes that weren't held together with anything, everything in my size. He'd known my measurements, had probably known them before he'd sent that first envelope. The blue dress hung front and center, a wrap style in silk that probably cost more than a month's rent at my old place. The possessiveness of it should have angered me. Instead, I felt that same dark thrill, the dangerous excitement of being so thoroughly claimed that he'd anticipated my needs before I'd even moved in. I wore the dress. At precisely 1 o'clock, I emerged from my suite to find Dante waiting in the main living area. He'd changed from whatever he'd worn that morning into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up again in that way that made my mouth go dry. His eyes tracked over me with an intensity that felt physical, lingering on the way the silk hugged my curves, the length of leg visible below the hem. "Perfect," he murmured, moving toward me. "I knew that color would suit you. You bought me an entire wardrobe without asking. I took care of you. There's a difference." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His muscles were solid beneath the fabric, and being this close allowed me to smell that cologne again, to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Come. We're dining in today." The dining room table was set for 2, though the spread of food could have fed 10 people. Italian dishes I couldn't name, fresh bread that smelled like heaven, wine that probably cost more than my old car. Dante pulled out my chair with old-world courtesy that felt incongruous with the possessive way he'd touched my throat last night. "Eat," he commanded softly, taking his own seat. "You're too thin." "I'm fine." "You're malnourished and exhausted, and it stops now." He served me himself, piling food onto my plate with the same authority he brought to everything else. "While you're under my protection, you'll be properly cared for." I wanted to argue, to insist I could take care of myself. But the smell of the food made my stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger, and I found myself eating with an enthusiasm that should have embarrassed me. Everything was delicious, rich and perfectly prepared, the kind of meal I'd only ever served to other people. Dante watched me eat with satisfaction, occasionally adding more to my plate before I could protest. "Better," he said. "You have color in your cheeks now. Why are you doing this?" The question escaped between bites. "Really, there has to be more to it than me reminding you of someone." His expression shuddered, walls going up so fast I almost missed the flicker of pain that preceded them. "Perhaps I'm simply a man who sees something valuable and claims it before anyone else can. I'm not a thing to be claimed, aren't you?" He leaned back, wine glass dangling from long fingers. "You agreed to this arrangement, Emma. You said yes to being mine. I said yes to security, to not drowning in debt and exhaustion. And in exchange, you gave yourself to me." His voice dropped to that dangerous purr. "Don't pretend you didn't understand the terms." Heat flooded my face, though whether from anger or something else I couldn't say. "I understood that you're arrogant and controlling and used to getting whatever you want. True on all counts." He smiled, unbothered by my assessment. "But you still said yes, which means some part of you wants this. Wants to be kept, protected, possessed. You don't know what I want, don't I?" He set down his glass and leaned forward, forearms on the table. "You want to matter, Emma. You want to be seen, to have your existence mean something beyond survival. You want someone to care if you're cold or hungry or afraid, and I can give you all of that, if you'll let me." The accuracy of his words stole my breath. How did he see so clearly into the desperate, hidden parts of me? How did he know the exact shape of the hole I'd been trying to fill with exhaustion and invisibility? Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something dangerous crossed his features. "I need to take this. Stay here." He rose and moved to the windows, phone pressed to his ear. I couldn't hear his words, but his posture told a story. Tension in his shoulders, the sharp gesture of his free hand. Whatever the call was about, it wasn't good. When he returned, his expression was carefully neutral, but I could sense the violence barely contained beneath the surface. "I have business to attend to," he said. "Marco will stay with you." "Marco?" As if summoned, one of the men from earlier appeared in the doorway. Up close I could see he was younger than I'd thought, mid-20s, with dark hair and watchful eyes. "Miss Torres," he acknowledged. "You're not leaving me with a babysitter, I said to Dante. "I'm leaving you with protection." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. "I told you. What's mine stays safe. Marco is one of my most trusted men. He'll ensure nothing happens to you while I'm gone." "What could possibly happen in your own apartment?" "You'd be surprised what enemies can accomplish when given opportunity." His eyes bored into mine. "Do not leave this apartment, Emma. Do not answer the door for anyone except me. Do not make me regret trusting you with this small amount of freedom. Understood?" The intensity of his stare, the steel in his voice, made me nod before I consciously decided to comply. "Understood." "Good." He pressed a kiss to my forehead, brief, possessive, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with Marco and questions I was afraid to ask. Marco positioned himself near the door, silent and watchful. I tried to ignore him, but his presence was a constant reminder that I wasn't free, that Dante's protection came with invisible chains. Hours passed. I explored my suite, tried to read, stared out at the city, and wondered what business required Dante's personal attention. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and still he didn't return. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, not Dante's. "Does he know how beautiful you look in that blue dress? How lucky he is?" Ice flooded my veins. I stared at the message, then at the windows. Someone was watching. Someone had seen me in the dress, knew I was here. Before I could process this, Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. "Understood, sir." He looked at me with something like pity. "Miss Torres, we need to move you to the secure room. Now." "What? Why?" "Mr. Salvatore's orders. Please, we don't have time to—" The windows exploded inward, glass shattered in a crystalline storm, and I screamed as Marco threw himself toward me, his body becoming a shield as we crashed to the floor. Something whistled over our heads. Bullets, I realized with distant horror, and then Marco was dragging me toward a door I hadn't noticed, camouflaged in the wall paneling. "Stay down," he barked, all politeness gone. His gun was in his hand. When had he drawn it? And he was speaking rapidly into his phone in Italian, too fast for me to follow. More gunfire. The sound of the front door being breached. Shouting in the hallway. The thunder of footsteps. Marco shoved me through the hidden door into a small, windowless room lined with concrete. A panic room, I realized. Dante had a panic room. "Lock this behind me," Marco commanded. "The code is 4417. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Salvatore." "Anyone. Do you understand?" "Marco, what's happening?" "They're here for you." His young face was grim. "Someone wants to take what belongs to the boss, and they're willing to start a war to do it." Then he was gone. The door slamming shut, leaving me in darkness with only the muffled sounds of violence and my own racing heart. I found the keypad, entered the code with shaking fingers, and listened to the lock engage with a finality that made me want to sob. This was my new reality. This was what came with Dante Salvatore's protection. Panic rooms and bodyguards and people shooting through windows to get to me. What had I agreed to? What kind of man had I given myself to? Time became meaningless in the dark. Minutes or hours could have passed before I heard it. The sound of the keypad being used, the correct code being entered. The door opened, and Dante stood in the doorway, backlit by the ruined apartment behind him. Blood stained his white shirt, though I couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. His expression was murder frozen in human form. Emma. My name was a prayer and a curse. He stepped into the room, and I saw his hands were shaking, the first sign of vulnerability I'd witnessed from him. "Did they touch you? Did anyone hurt you?" "No, Marco. He protected me." "Is he—" "He's alive. Injured, but alive." Dante pulled me to my feet, his hands running over me as if checking for wounds, reassuring himself I was whole. "This is my fault. I underestimated how quickly they'd move, how bold they'd become." Who did this?" His jaw clenched. "Enemies I've made. Rivals who see you as weakness, as leverage against me." His hands framed my face, forcing me to meet his wild eyes. "I told you I protect what's mine, Emma. Now you understand why that protection is necessary. You should have warned me." Should have told me keeping me would make me a target. And would you have stayed if I had? His voice was raw. Would you have agreed if you'd known loving me came with bullets through windows and men willing to kill for the chance to hurt me through you? The word hung between us, love. He'd said love. Dante? No. He crushed me against his chest, and I felt his heart hammering against my cheek. You're mine now. That makes you the most valuable thing in my world, and the most vulnerable. I will burn down empires to keep you safe, Emma. I will kill anyone who even thinks about touching you, but I cannot let you go. I should have been terrified, should have demanded he release me, should have run from this man who dealt in violence and possession. But wrapped in his arms, feeling his desperation and fury, I felt something else entirely, wanted, protected, claimed so completely that men would die for the crime of threatening me. Who were they? I whispered against his blood-stained shirt. Dead men, he said simply. Marco's people are cleaning up now. But we can't stay here, it's compromised. I'm taking you somewhere safer, somewhere no one will think to look. Where? He pulled back just enough to look at me, and his smile was all sharp edges and dark promises. Home. My real home, where I can keep you locked away like the treasure you are until I've eliminated every threat against you. That sounds like a prison. It's a fortress, he corrected. And you'll learn to love your cage, Emma. Because I'll make it so beautiful, so comfortable, that you'll never want to leave. His mouth crashed against mine then. A kiss that tasted like possession and desperation, and something that might have been love if love could be this dark and consuming. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his ruined shirt, and somewhere in the destroyed apartment around us, I heard men moving, cleaning, erasing evidence of the violence that had shattered my illusion of safety. This was my life now, gilded cages and bloody shirts, and a man who would kill to keep me. And God help me, I was starting to want exactly that. Dante's real home turned out to be an estate outside the city that looked like it belonged in a movie about old money and older secrets. We arrived in the dead of night, the SUV's headlights cutting through darkness to illuminate wrought iron gates that opened silently at our approach. The drive wound through manicured grounds, past gardens I could barely see in the shadows, until a sprawling stone mansion materialized like something from another era. Ivy crawled up the walls, and warm light glowed from windows that watched our arrival like vigilant eyes. It's been in my family for 3 generations, Dante said, his first word since we'd left the city. His hand hadn't left mine the entire drive, fingers interlaced with a possessiveness that had become familiar. My grandfather built it when he first came to America. It survived wars, FBI raids, and family feuds. It'll survive this too. I wanted to ask what this was, the attack, the enemies, the dangerous game I'd been pulled into. But exhaustion weighed on me like a physical thing, and the adrenaline crash had left me hollow and shaking. The interior was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like it simultaneously. Yes, there was old-world luxury. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, dark wood paneling that gleamed with care. But there were also modern security systems, cameras in every corner, and men stationed at intervals who nodded respectfully as Dante passed. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress, just as he'd promised. Your room is this way. He guided me up a grand staircase, past portraits of severe-looking men who shared his dark eyes and sharp features. It adjoins mine. I want you close. Of course you do, I murmured, too tired to put real heat behind the sarcasm. His hand tightened on mine. Mock me if you need to, Emma. But after tonight, after watching men breach my home to get to you, I will not apologize for keeping you within reach. The room he showed me to was beautiful. Larger even than the guest suite at the penthouse, decorated in soft grays and creams that should have been calming. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, piled with pillows and blankets that looked cloud-soft. French doors opened onto a balcony, though I noticed the bulletproof glass immediately, the reinforced construction. The bathroom is through there, Dante said, gesturing. I've had clothes brought for you, toiletries, everything you should need. But Emma... He turned me to face him, hands on my shoulders, expression grave. Do not go outside without me or one of my men. Do not open those doors, even though they're reinforced, until I've eliminated the threat against you. This room and the main floor are your world, understood? You're really locking me up. I'm keeping you alive. His thumb stroked my collarbone, the touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. The men who came tonight weren't there to kidnap you for ransom, Emma. They were there to kill you, slowly and painfully, while making sure I knew exactly what was happening to you. So yes, I'm locking you up, and I won't lose a moment's sleep over it. The blunt honesty stole my breath. Who hates you that much? Many people. It comes with the territory. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, lingering there as if drawing strength from the contact. But I've narrowed it down to 3 families who might be bold enough to strike at me directly. By morning, I'll know which one signed their own death warrant. What will you do to them? His smile was terrible to behold. What I do best, Tesoro. I'll remind them why the Salvatore name is spoken in whispers. He released me, stepping back toward the door that must connect to his room. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next, Dante. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Thank you. For protecting me. For caring if I live or die. Something softened in his expression. Emma, you absolute fool. Caring if you live or die is the least of what I feel for you. Sleep now. We'll discuss the rest when you're not swaying on your feet. He left, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded different from a lock. I stood alone in my gilded prison, staring at luxury that was supposed to comfort me, and felt tears burn behind my eyes. What had my life become? 2 weeks ago, I'd been invisible, exhausted, but relatively safe in my anonymity. Now I was locked in a mansion with a man who spoke casually of killing, who looked at me like I was oxygen and he was drowning, who'd turned me into a target simply by deciding I belonged to him. I should have been planning escape. Instead, I found myself at the connecting door, pressing my palm flat against the wood as if I could feel him on the other side. Some twisted part of me wanted to open it, to seek comfort in the arms of the man who'd made me a prisoner. I didn't. But I wanted to, and that was almost worse. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of shattering glass and the sound of gunfire. I woke repeatedly, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, my heart racing with phantom fear. Each time, I heard movement from Dante's room, pacing, the low murmur of phone conversations, evidence that he wasn't sleeping either. Morning arrived gray and unwelcoming. I showered in the enormous bathroom, used products that probably cost more than my old weekly grocery budget, and dressed in jeans and a soft sweater I found in the closet. Simple clothes, but they fit perfectly, because of course Dante had ensured every detail was correct. When I emerged, I found him waiting in my room, standing by the French doors and looking out over grounds now visible in daylight. He'd changed into fresh clothes, black slacks and a charcoal sweater that emphasized his lean strength. His hair was damp from a recent shower, and he held a coffee cup that released steam into the cool air. You didn't sleep, I observed. Neither did you. I heard you wake 3 times. He turned, and I saw exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the tightness of his jaw. Coffee? Please. He'd had a full breakfast spread set up on the balcony table. Pastries, fruit, more coffee, dishes I couldn't name. We sat across from each other, and for a few minutes, there was only the sound of silverware on china and birds singing in the gardens below. I know who ordered the attack, Dante said finally. The Moretti family. They've been looking for an opening against me for months, and apparently, they decided you were it. Why? What did you do to them? His laugh was humorless. I exist. I control territory they want, business they think should be theirs. And 6 months ago, I may have killed the eldest son when he tried to move product through my streets without permission. The casual admission should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself nodding, accepting this new reality where murder was discussed over croissants. What happens now? Now I make an example. He set down his cup with precise control. I take everything they have, piece by piece, until they understand that touching what's mine costs everything. And then, when they're broken and desperate, I'll let them see you, alive, safe, completely untouchable, before I finish them. That's cruel, excessive. His eyes met mine, cold and utterly pitiless. They tried to kill you, Emma, They put bullets through my windows with you inside. There is no punishment severe enough for that crime. I should have argued, should have been appalled by his bloodthirsty vengeance. But sitting there in the morning light, remembering the terror of hiding in that panic room while men tried to kill me, I couldn't find it in myself to care about the fate of people who'd seen me as nothing more than a tool to hurt Dante. How long will I have to stay here? I asked instead. As long as necessary. He reached across the table, capturing my hand. I know it feels like captivity, Emma. But it's the only way I can guarantee your safety until the threat is eliminated. And after? When the Morettis are dealt with? Do I get to leave then? His grip tightened fractionally. You're not a prisoner, Tesoro. You can walk away whenever you choose. But know that if you do, my protection goes with you. Every enemy I've made will see you as fair game, as the woman who rejected Dante Salvatore, and therefore deserves whatever fate befalls her. That's manipulative. That's reality. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. I didn't create the world we live in, Emma. I just learned how to survive it. And now that you're part of my world, you need to learn the same. Before I could respond, one of his men appeared at the door, an older man with silver hair and a face that had seen decades of violence. Boss, we have a situation in the South Garden. Dante's expression went cold. What kind of situation, Nico? The kind that requires your personal attention. Nico's eyes flicked to me, then away. And perhaps Miss Torres should be moved to the secure room while you handle it. No. The word was sharp, immediate. She stays in my sight. I'm not letting her out of my sight until every Moretti is in the ground. He stood, pulling me up with him, and I saw his other hand move to his waistband, checking for the weapon I now knew he always carried. Come. Stay close to me and do exactly as I say. We moved through the mansion, Nico falling into step behind us. 2 more guards materializing from corners I hadn't noticed. The security was suffocating. But after last night, I understood its necessity. We descended to the main floor, then out through glass doors into the meticulously maintained gardens. The morning was cool, crisp with the promise of autumn. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. The sculpted hedges, the fountain at the garden's center, the roses still blooming despite the season. But Dante's tension infected the air, made every shadow threatening. We found them near the back wall, 3 men on their knees, hands bound behind their backs, duct tape over their mouths. More of Dante's guards stood in a semicircle, weapons drawn, expressions carved from stone. And in the center of it all, sprawled carelessly on the perfectly manicured grass, was a body. I recognized him despite the damage. One of the men from the penthouse attack, the one who'd been shooting through the windows. His throat had been cut, and judging by the amount of blood, it had been recent. We found them trying to breach the east wall, Nico explained. Marco's team neutralized them before they got more than 20 feet. The dead one tried to fight. The others surrendered. Dante released my hand, but his voice was low and commanding. Stay here. Don't move. Don't speak. Just watch. He approached the kneeling men with predatory grace, and I watched as fear transformed their faces. They knew who he was, knew what was coming, and their eyes went wide with the kind of terror that comes from understanding death is inevitable. You came for what's mine, Dante said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. That was your first mistake. Your second was surviving long enough to face me. He crouched before them, perfectly balanced, perfectly calm. I want you to carry a message back to whoever sent you. Can you do that? The men nodded frantically, desperate to please, to prove their usefulness, and earn the possibility of mercy. Dante smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Good. Tell them that Emma Torres is under my personal protection. Tell them that any attempt to harm her, threaten her, or even speak her name with disrespect will result in the complete annihilation of their bloodline. Tell them I will kill their families, burn their businesses, and salt the earth where they stood. And tell them, he stood, pulling his gun with fluid ease, that this is what happens to those who don't believe me. He shot the first man through the knee. The sound cracked through the morning air, sending birds screaming from trees. The man's scream was muffled by the tape, but I could see the agony twist his features as he crumpled sideways. That's for the attempt on her life. Dante moved to the second man, pressed the gun to his shoulder, and fired again. That's for making her afraid. The third man received a bullet to his other knee. And that's so you remember to deliver my message exactly as stated. He holstered his weapon and gestured to his guards. Patch them up enough that they won't bleed out, then send them back to their masters. Make sure they understand this was mercy, and they won't receive it twice. Then he turned back to me, his expression transforming from cold violence to something warmer, more possessive. Come, Tesoro. You've seen enough. But I couldn't move. I stood frozen, staring at the blood seeping into perfect grass, at men writhing in pain that Dante had inflicted with surgical precision. This was who he was. Not just the man who bought me dresses and worried about whether I ate enough, but someone capable of calculated brutality without hesitation. He reached me, his hand gentle on my cheek, despite having just pulled a trigger 3 times. I told you I protect what's mine, he said softly. This is what that looks like, Emma. This is the monster you've given yourself to. I looked into his dark eyes and saw expectation there, waiting for me to recoil, to finally understand what I'd gotten myself into and choose to run. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, seeking the warmth of his palm against my cold skin. I'm not afraid of you, I whispered, and realized with distant shock that it was true. I should have been terrified, repulsed, desperate to escape. But all I felt was a strange, dark security in knowing that this man, this violent, possessive, dangerous man, would burn the world down before letting anyone hurt me. You should be, he murmured. But his eyes held something like relief, like gratitude that I hadn't rejected the darkness in him. Come. Let me show you the rest of the estate, the boundaries of your beautiful cage. He led me away from the violence, away from the bleeding men and the body cooling in the grass, and I followed willingly, because somewhere between the restaurant and the panic room in this blood-stained morning, I'd stopped being his prisoner and become something far more dangerous. I'd become his willing captive. And God help me, I was starting to crave the chains. 3 weeks passed in my gilded fortress, and with each day, the line between captivity and belonging blurred further. Dante had been right about one thing. He'd made my cage beautiful. The estate became familiar, its rooms and gardens mapping themselves in my memory. I learned which hallways caught morning light, which sitting rooms offered the best view of sunset. I discovered the library with its floor-to-ceiling books and leather chairs that smelled of age and privilege. I found the conservatory where orchids bloomed in impossible colors, tended by a gardener who nodded respectfully but never spoke. And through it all, Dante was there, not hovering, not suffocating, but present in a way that felt like gravity, an inescapable force that kept me orbiting around him. He worked from home most days, conducting business from his study while I read or explored or simply existed in the same space. Sometimes he'd call me in, gesture for me to sit while he finished a call, and I'd watch him navigate whatever empire he'd built with quiet authority. Other times, he'd find me in the library and read beside me in companionable silence, his presence a warm anchor in my new reality. The nights were different. The nights were when his control slipped, when I'd wake to find him standing at the connecting door between our rooms, watching me sleep with an expression that mixed protection and possession in equal measure. The nights were when he'd pull me against him on the terrace, pointing out constellations while his hands mapped my body like territory he owned. The nights were when he'd kiss me with desperate hunger, then pull away before things went further, leaving us both frustrated and aching. Not yet, he'd say, breathing hard, forehead pressed to mine. Not until you're truly mine. Not just because circumstances trapped you here. I wanted to tell him I was already his, that whatever resistance I'd started with had crumbled under the weight of his obsessive care. But some stubborn part of me held back, afraid of what complete surrender would mean. The morning everything changed started like any other. I woke to find coffee and pastries waiting on my balcony table, placed there by staff I never saw but who anticipated my every need. The autumn air had turned crisp, and I wrapped myself in a cashmere robe, another gift from Dante, before stepping outside to eat. Below, in the gardens, I could see him walking with Nico, deep in conversation. Even from this distance, I could read the tension in his shoulders, the sharp gestures that suggested bad news. My chest tightened with worry I had no right to feel. When had his problems become mine? When had his stress started to affect me like physical pain? A knock at my door pulled me from contemplation. "Come in," I called, expecting one of the household staff. Instead, a woman entered, mid-30s, beautiful in a polished way that spoke of money and power, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my old car. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, and her eyes were the same shade as Dante's. She studied me with unconcealed interest, a small smile playing at her lips. "So you're Emma," she said, her accent clearly Italian despite years in America. "The woman who has my brother so thoroughly obsessed he's started a war to keep you safe." His sister, I realized, feeling suddenly underdressed in my robe and bare feet. He didn't mention that he had family? No, Dante wouldn't. He likes to pretend he's an island, completely self-sufficient. She moved into the room with confident grace, taking in the expensive furnishings, the clothes in the open closet, the evidence of my comfortable captivity. "I'm Valentina, and I needed to meet the woman worth burning down the Moretti Empire over." "I didn't ask him to do that, no? But you're letting him." Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "You're letting him keep you locked away, letting him obsess over your safety, letting him turn himself inside out to prove he can protect you. That's power, Emma. The question is, what will you do with it?" I had no answer. I'd been so focused on survival, on navigating the impossible situation I'd found myself in, that I hadn't considered I might have power in this dynamic. Dante held all the cards, made all the decisions, controlled every aspect of my existence. How could I possibly have power? Valentina's smile widened as if she could read my thoughts. "You really don't see it, do you? My brother is one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast. He's feared, respected, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. And yet he watches you like you're the sun, and he's been living in darkness. That's power, Cara. Use it wisely." Before I could respond, Dante's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Valentina, what are you doing here?" He stood in the doorway, and I'd never seen him look quite so dangerous. His expression was thunderous, his body coiled with barely contained fury, but his sister just laughed, unbothered by his anger. "Meeting your little obsession, obviously. Someone had to make sure she was real, and not some fever dream you'd conjured." Valentina moved toward him, stopping to kiss his cheek despite his rigid posture. "Relax, Fratello. I like her. She has more spine than I expected from someone you've locked in a tower. Get out." I'm going. She paused at the door, looking back at me. "It was lovely meeting you, Emma. I suspect we'll be seeing much more of each other soon." Then to Dante. "The Moretti situation is resolved, by the way. Paolo sent word this morning, complete surrender, along with a formal apology and reparations. Your little display in the garden convinced them you weren't bluffing." She left, and the silence she left behind felt heavy with unspoken things. Dante remained in the doorway, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You can leave now," he said quietly. "The threat is eliminated. The Morettis won't come near you again, and I've sent word through appropriate channels that you're under my protection. You're free to go back to your life, if that's what you want." My heart stuttered. Just like that. Just like that. But his hands were fisted at his sides, and his voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "I told you from the beginning, you're not a prisoner. I kept you here to keep you safe. Now that you're safe, the choice is yours." I should have felt relief, should have been planning my escape, imagining my return to normal life. Instead, I felt panic claw at my throat at the thought of leaving this place, leaving him. What if I don't want to leave? The words escaped before I could stop them. His expression transformed, hope and hunger and desperate relief all at once. "Emma, you asked me to let you take care of me," I continued, moving toward him. "You promised me I'd never be cold or hungry or invisible again. You've kept those promises, Dante, every single one. And somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting to leave. You're saying this because you feel obligated." "I'm saying this because it's true." I closed the distance between us, reaching up to cup his face. "I'm saying this because I've watched you for 3 weeks. seen how you care for me, how you've turned yourself inside out to keep me safe. I'm saying this because I've fallen in love with my captor, and I don't know how to apologize for that." He made a sound like pain and pulled me against him, his arms banding around me with crushing force. "Don't apologize. Never apologize for giving me everything I've wanted since the moment you stumbled into my life." His mouth found mine, and this kiss was different from all the others. Deeper, more desperate, full of promises and possession. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you since you looked at me with exhausted eyes and apologized for existing. I loved you when you said yes to my insane proposal. I loved you when you watched me shoot 3 men and didn't run screaming. And I'll love you until I stop breathing, Emma Torres. That's very dramatic. I'm Italian. We don't do anything halfway." His smile was pure joy, transforming his usually severe features. "So you'll stay? You'll let me keep you, care for you, love you the only way I know how? On one condition." His expression turned wary. "Name it." "I'm not staying locked in this beautiful cage forever. I want to live, Dante. Really live. I want to see the city, take walks without bodyguards hovering, have something resembling a normal life. Emma, I'm not asking for complete freedom. I understand your world now, understand the dangers, but I won't be a pretty bird you keep safe by keeping caged. If you love me, you have to trust me enough to let me breathe." He was quiet for a long moment, conflict warring in his dark eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Bodyguards stay. Non-negotiable. And certain places are off limits until I'm certain there are no residual threats. But yes, we'll find a balance. I'll try not to suffocate you with protection. Try being the operative word. I'm a work in progress." He kissed me again, softer this time, but for you, Tesoro, I'll try. The next few months proved he meant it. Slowly, carefully, my world expanded beyond the estate's walls. Dante took me to galleries and restaurants, always surrounded by discreet security but no longer imprisoned. He introduced me to his world, not the violent parts, but the legitimate businesses, the charitable foundations, the complex web of power and influence he'd built. And I found my place in it, not as decoration or possession, but as partner. I started helping with his charitable work, using my college education, unfinished as it was, to make a difference. He set up a scholarship fund in my name for students struggling to afford education. We donated to women's shelters, food banks, programs I'd once relied on myself. "You're making me soft," he complained one evening as I convinced him to increase funding to a youth center in Queens. "I'm making you human," I corrected, kissing his jaw. "There's a difference." Valentina became a frequent visitor, her sharp wit and unconditional acceptance making her the sister I'd never had. Through her, I met others in Dante's world, not the soldiers and enforcers, but the families, the wives and children of men who lived in shadows. They welcomed me with surprising warmth, these women who understood what it meant to love dangerous men. 6 months after that morning in the garden, Dante proposed. Not with grand gestures or public displays, but quietly, in the library where I'd spent so many afternoons reading while he worked. He simply knelt before my chair, pulled out a ring that must have cost a fortune, and said, "Marry me. Make this official. Make you truly mine in every way that matters." I said yes before he'd finished speaking. The wedding was small, private, held in the estate's gardens, where I'd once watched him shoot 3 men to protect me. The contrast should have been jarring, but somehow it felt right. Beauty and violence, love and danger, all tangled together in the life we'd built. As I walked down an aisle lined with roses, wearing a dress that made me feel like a princess, I caught sight of Dante waiting for me. He wore a tuxedo that emphasized his lean strength, and his eyes held everything I'd come to recognize: possession, protection, and love so fierce it bordered on obsession. This was my choice, my life, my beautiful, dangerous, impossible love story. When I reached him, he took my hand, and I felt the calluses there, evidence of a life lived in shadows, of violence committed in the name of protection, but I also felt the tenderness in his touch, the way his thumb stroked my knuckles as if I were infinitely precious. "I love you," he murmured as the officiant began speaking. "My stubborn, beautiful Emma. Thank you for stumbling into my life and giving me a reason to be more than what I was." "I love you too," I whispered back. My possessive, overprotective, occasionally terrifying Dante. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings, and the kiss that sealed us together officially. But the moment I remembered most clearly came later, as we danced under stars in the garden while our small gathering of guests looked on. "Do you regret it?" Dante asked, holding me close as we swayed to music only we could hear. "Saying yes to a stranger who spilled water on himself and decided you were his?" I thought about the girl I'd been, exhausted, invisible, drowning in a life that offered no hope of ever being more. I thought about the woman I'd become, loved, protected, empowered to make real change in the world. I thought about the man who'd looked at me and seen worth when I'd forgotten I had any. "Not for a single second," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. He smiled, and in that smile I saw our future. Complicated, certainly, probably dangerous at times, but ours. Built on a foundation of obsessive love and mutual choice, and the strange alchemy that happened when a waitress spilled water on a mafia boss and changed both their lives forever. "Good," he murmured against my hair. "Because I'm never letting you go, Mrs. Salvatore. You're mine until the stars burn out. Possessive to the end, always." He tilted my face up to his, and his kiss tasted like promise and forever. "But you knew that when you said yes." I had. And I'd said yes anyway, choosing love wrapped in danger over safety wrapped in emptiness. Some might call it Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding or a dozen other clinical terms. But standing there in my husband's arms, surrounded by people who'd become family, living a life I'd never dared dream possible, I knew it was simply this: love. Complicated, possessive, dangerous, and absolutely real. And it was ours.